Taylor. Andre Taylor, a convicted sex trafficker. Back in the day, they called it a pimp. These days, they call it sex trafficker, right? He's now got a $150,000 contract with the city of Seattle. And so I just want to show you, though, how crazy things are in Seattle right now.
Seattle's Office of Police Accountability is also looking into new allegations that a police captain was given preferential treatment after being arrested for soliciting a prostitute. King 5's Chris Daniels has that story.
Whether or not the captain received preferential treatment from his chain of command, and that's definitely an aspect of the case that we're going to look into. But
that's the reaction tonight from Andrew Meyerberg, who heads Seattle's Office of Police Accountability, to allegations officers gave preferential treatment to a police captain arrested in a prostitution sting.
May I talk to the sergeant?
The Seattle Times broke the news that body cam video showed the arrest of Captain Randall Woolery and a sergeant telling Woolery he would make the arrest as painless as possible before turning off the camera.
Can we go around the corner for a second?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to turn off my camera just for a minute.
The Times says Woolery was in contact with high-ranking officers almost immediately and taken downtown instead of the North Precinct, where he was given an expedited booking and release. King 5 told you about the arrest last November, part of an Aurora Avenue prostitution sting. Woolery, who reviewed use of force cases, has been on paid leave since, charged with sexual exploitation. The misdemeanor case has been held up because of the COVID crisis, while he also continues to serve as a Snohomish County Fire Commissioner. The allegations add a new layer as reform remains a hot topic in this town.
Turning off of the body cam, it's been looked at, investigated, and it was deemed to be a violation of policy. And before she retired, Chief Best had approved that case and imposed discipline on the sergeant.
All right, so we're joined by Nikki Barron now, producer Nikki Barron, and I brought Nikki in because Nikki is very, very big on women's rights, everything all in that lane. And I wanted to point something out. This is the city that we're living in right now, though, right? So the city that we're living in hired an human trafficker who was convicted years ago he's been out for 20 some odd years, paying him $150,000 a year. And the city also has a police officer who's engaging in sex trafficking, who's on paid leave getting $174,000 a year. So it's like the city of Seattle, especially if this is the issue around sex trafficking and the issue of women and women representation and everything else, you got an officer who also, by the way, it wasn't just the fact that he got arrested for solicitation and that he's on leave, still getting $174,000 a year and still doing something in Snohomish County, but also got preferential treatment. They turned off the body camera. They gave him an expedited booking and everything else. Now, Nikki, I wanted you to come in here because, I mean, when these two things were happening simultaneously and talking to you, you had so much frustration and angst about it. So I thought that today might be a good day for you to elaborate on this further.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a few points in this that really rub me the wrong way. One is, that he did get that preferential treatment. It's more evidence that there is a culture of secrecy and there's a culture of protecting each other in the police force. And we're seeing that everywhere right now. So it's just more evidence that the police are going to lie and do whatever they can to protect each other and give each other preferential treatment. So there's that aspect. There's the other aspect of, he's getting a lot of money to sit at home while this case is on pause because they're not doing misdemeanor cases right now. So the OPA also decided they would also not investigate until the misdemeanor case is being investigated. So he's just sitting at home getting paid. And he didn't have to go through the same shaming process that the other 4 people arrested during the same sting are having to go through. And then when you look at his position, this man has been entrusted to oversee when other police officers need to be looked at for accountability. And yet he's over here on Aurora engaging in sex work with a term that they call survival sex work, which is not sex work that is done by choice, but it's rather something they're forced into, which predominantly is Black and brown communities, trans communities are the ones that are being forced into sex work. 80% of survival sex workers are also unhoused. So here's this person who's supposed to be the moral judgment of police officers when they make quote unquote mistakes, is engaging in abuse of vulnerable communities. So those are kind of the big things for me that, like, when I saw this story, I just like went right there because it was just extremely frustrating.
Right, and you're no fan. You're no fan of Andre Taylor. I would just throw it out there. You know what I'm saying? We went the other day up there, and I mean, me and you had a lot of discussion about Andre going into that interview and after the interview.
Yeah, I appreciated you taking me with you so that I could meet him myself. I could watch the full interview and really get a sense of, what he says he stands for. And yeah, what Andre did is, again, it's not ethical sex work. It wasn't like he, was building a platform for women to engage in sex work that they chose to engage in and make, the money that they want to make. It was pulling women from your own community and turning them out on the street for his profit. And I understand, we live in a country where we say you do your time and you can reform and you can come back and be a member of society again. And if I want to believe that about other people who've made mistakes, I have to believe that about Andre Taylor as well. But yeah, it's a very similar situation, and it's really messed up because the people taking advantage, like the Johns, quote unquote, it's the exact same charge if you are a prostitute or if you actually solicit sex. So and more likely the prostitute is sent to prison or sent to jail. And there's a lot of complicated rules around what happens once you get there for people who work in sex work, and the man leaves with a ticket. So it's a really unfair system where the people who are vulnerable, who feel forced to engage in this work, are also penalized harder than the people who take advantage of those people.
Right. And I'm right before I pop you in here, Triana. I just thought that, it's interesting for the public to see like what's going on here, what I'm saying, in the city. And I'm doing this work. I've met quite a few female officers over at SPD and had conversations with them about this particular case right here. And there's a lot of comments, that aren't privy to the public that's made that kind of shows that what they alluded to was that, it's an environment that's very much not okay that's over there when this right here, when we see this in plain sight. And like I said, this officer, now Andre Taylor got 150,000, and this officer got 174,000. They're coming and going over here. Oh, what are you saying, Triana?
No, I was just going to say, I agree with you that it's, Nikki, thank you for pulling out those facts and highlighting them, because I think you're so right in terms of people understanding the severity of the charges. And, yes, this idea that second chances exist is one thing, but you're right where, folks, it makes people uncomfortable, because how much can you really show retribution for that? And I think that that's where we as a society have a lot of work to do there, because it is very objective in that regard, right? You do your time, you come out, you're doing great work for community, and that's amazing. I think you're, also too, I'm glad you were there so that you could meet him too and be able to hear the whole interview. So I can't wait to touch bases with you afterwards. But, honestly, I think that, excuse me. Oh, sorry, had to sneeze. But I think that putting those two salaries up against one another and really doing a comparison between the two stories is right on point, because we're seeing this now. It's across color lines. And so I'm wondering, is the city or, the police force, is there some type of leniency when it comes to sex trafficking? Once again, showcasing that the men are not going to be really taking the brunt of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% is sex trafficking. Andre Taylor was convicted for sex trafficking. This officer right here arrested for it. Now, everybody has a different name. Back in those days, it was called pimping. You know what I'm saying? And pimping and John and everything else. And these days it's called sex trafficking. And so, like, I mean, like I said, this is our city right now. I mean, imagine that.
I also wanted to point out that when the media mentions Andre Taylor, they never fail to mention that he was a pimp. But when the media has covered this officer, they always say that he was a wonderful officer, that he's been in high regard. So they're like, look at this bad thing he did, but look how wonderful he actually is. He just made a mistake. But with Andre, they're like, look at this wonderful thing he did, but don't forget that he used to be a pimp. And that's very clearly has to do with the color of their skin.
Yeah, we see this kind of media all the time. Once again, part of the old normal.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that we see here is how many years has this officer been out there sex trafficking?
Yeah.
That's the even bigger question. How many other times maybe was he caught in this thing before they had the body cam? The body cam made the officer be accountable, even though he turned off the body cam. The body cam made the officer hold him accountable, and they at least had to book him and expedite him. You know, how long a guy's been out there before the body cams that got caught up in stings?
It's also wild because it's been known that they've been doing stings since 2017 on Aurora, ever since so they've been doing that. So this guy knew that there was this potential risk that he was going to get caught and picked up. And you know why he engaged in it? Because he knew that even if he did get caught, it was going to be okay. It wasn't going to be a big deal, that his police officer brothers and sisters were going to watch his back, turn off their body cams, and make sure this all went away. And that's why he had the gumption to like go out there knowing that he could get picked up.
Yeah, you know what? Also, too, I'll say that this also goes to a larger modicum around the excessive use of authority. Okay, because honestly, officers, when it comes to sex trafficking and taking advantage of certain suspects, certain victims at times, we hear these stories come out, and it is true. The excessive use of their authority and that power struggle and how they utilize and wield their power. This is another example of that. And honestly, I wonder, like you are just saying, I wonder how many times has he actually abused his power and gotten sex in ways that was not voluntary, as you mentioned earlier, Nikki, which I think also is so important to acknowledge, because there is a major difference between someone who goes, this person chooses this lifestyle and I'm choosing to pay them for sex. And I know that it's wrong, but we're both making choices here, versus understanding that you are going through some type of faction that has people that are not voluntarily doing this. That is also very, very key here. And it says a lot about this person's character. And that to me is what always should be at the forefront of this. I'm sorry, it's almost disgusting that he's at home getting paid right now while these charges are still formulating. It's reprehensible.
When they asked the commanding officer, about this, what do you think about this? His response was, sex workers like it. They like this work. This is what they like to do. And it's like a $40 sex act on Aurora is not a person who's enjoying their sex work and they're feeling empowered and they're using their body how they want to use it. You know what I mean? Like, and for his commanding officer or the officer the highest ranking officer involved in the arrest, for him to say that is just, it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible to say that a $40 sex act on Aurora is the same as the women in Las Vegas who are engaging in legal sex work. Like, to make that association is also just like completely trying to act like this is no big deal. And it absolutely is a big deal when an officer whose entire job is to judge other officers' mistakes is out here doing this, knowing he's going to get it covered up and not worried about it. And now he's at home getting paid. Like, wow. He's even getting paid more than Andre Taylor.
Wow. This is the triple entendre here. Oh, this is really the Oreo right here, because it's got the layers.
We fired up today. Hey, look, we're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, I had an interview with Ashley Rico from KUOW about what's going on at the King County Jail. You are watching The Morning